Yes, 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 so much yes. I freaking love these football boots. But there's a huge but here. This doesn't mean that these are going to be for everyone, and the following that the Puma Ultra built up with the 1.1 and 1.2 variations, particularly from those people with high volume or wider feet, oh, that might have just been cut off at the knees. Do I think this is a better football boot than the previous generation? Yes, but it's certainly not gonna be for everybody. Let's jump into it and find out why. In what has become standard practice for the Puma Ultra and many other Puma speed boots, we're going to skip the other tech details and go straight to the weight first, because it's a key selling point and it's pretty damn impressive. These coming in at 152 grams. Now I have small feet. These are in a US 8, which is quite small, but 152 grams for a general release pair of football boots. This is lighter than both previous variations of the Ultra. It is the lightest mass-produced football boot on the market. This is mighty impressive. Now, is it going to make you any faster? No. Is it important to have the lightest football boots possible? No. But if it is something that you are looking for and you are somebody that likes that sensation, these are absolutely top of your shopping list with a bullet right now. There's nothing that even comes close. And they feel it on feet as well. They feel painted on, lightweight, springy, aggressive. They are everything that you would expect from a boot that weighs 153 grams in the speed boot category with an aggressive outsole. It ticks almost every single box, and the weight is a key component of that, even if I don't think it's the most important thing that we can look at. Flipping into the outsole, this is exactly the same outsole that we got on the previous 2 generations of Puma Ultra. No modifications have been made here. It's a nice aggressive sole plate with these more kind of bladed studs in the heel and up through the midfoot, and then the more chevron style studs in the forefoot. The studs are definitely long enough to give you good purchase in the ground. They feel super aggressive. The sole plate itself is super light, which definitely adds to that lightweight feeling of the boot, and I don't really have any complaints. The only thing to say is that of the big 3 brands, Nike, Adidas, and Puma, looking at their speed boots, this is the least aggressive outsole, but that doesn't mean that it's bad. It just so happens that Adidas on their Speed Flow have that Carbotex insert, which makes it super aggressive, and then the Nike stud pattern on the Mercurial is just more aggressive. There's nothing wrong with going for this, and I would happily wear this instead of at the same time as the Adidas and the Nike. It's not a deal breaker, but if the most aggressive outsole is what you're looking for, this isn't it, but it is plenty aggressive, and I have no complaints at all. It is still nice and springy while being nice and stable through that midfoot and the heel, but it will give you a little bit more flexibility, freedom, and even to some degree comfort when compared to things like the Speed Flow and maybe even the Mercurial. Let's talk about value for money. Now, Puma have done something that I think is incredibly smart, and they have positioned themselves to be a more affordable option than both Adidas and Nike, and frequently New Balance also, who are trying to break into that top 3. These become your kind of budget top end boot from a big brand, and I say that with a little trepidation because budget is a strong word to use when we're talking about €200 football boots, but they are €200. The Speed Flow and the Mercurial are both more expensive than that, so if you are looking to save a bit of money and buy a top end speed boot, there is nothing wrong with looking to pick up these, because honestly they are fantastic and they can absolutely compete. They can definitely go toe to toe with the other boot brands, so €200 does to some degree offer good value for money if you look at it in the right light. Let's talk upper technology, and it's very clearly stated on the side of the boot the three main pieces of upper technology that you get. You get the Matrix Evo upper, you get the Grip Control Pro element, and you also get the speed cage. The Grip Control Pro and Matrix Evo were on the previous generation. The speed cage is brand new. So what is it? The speed cage is this liner that you can see just here with all the cutouts in it. Now this does more than just provides the liner. This actually really aids the responsiveness of this boot, and the responsiveness of the boot is fantastic. This is a big step up in terms of that responsiveness from the previous generation, and that speed cage does a large part of the lifting. You can see obviously the cutouts that are in it. They're there partly for design and also to keep that weight down, reduce the weight as much as possible, and honestly they do a really fantastic job, and I do love a responsive football boot. Massive plus for that here in the new Ultra. What about the other two elements? Well, the Grip Control Pro is nice and easy to explain. It is a top coating. So this is the plastic top coating that's been put on the boot to both protect the Matrix Evo upper, and it also gives you a nice amount of grippy, textured finish, which is something that you don't always get on speed boots, and this is definitely better than what you might expect to get from both the Mercurial and the Speed Flow. It has a much more tacky, tactile feeling, and I really like it. It just adds that little bit extra to the boot. So on top of getting a super raw barefoot sensation, which is exactly what this is, you do feel like you've got a little bit of assistance on the ball. The Matrix Evo technology essentially is just a woven technology that Puma use in order to build the boot. And you can see here there's a very tight weave that runs through the forefoot of the boot. Now the previous boot was woven as well. It wasn't knitted, it was a weave. And this is exactly the same. And then as you move through the midfoot of the boot, you can see this distinct line here where it transitions into a much lighter weave. It's not quite as structured, but it still feels absolutely fantastic. And that's that big open cross pattern that you can see there. However, these kind of clear areas here are actually a good way of showing that the whole boot itself is still made up of woven yarns, and in here this isn't just a solid plastic, it is still a very tight weave, and they've chosen to make these sections out of transparent weave so you can see through the boot. The boot isn't so thin you can see through it, it's actually been designed that way so that you can see through it as an aesthetic choice. I think it's a pretty cool aesthetic choice. Now, while I'm confident that the Matrix Evo technology remains the same, so the boot is built using the same woven process, the actual yarns that they've used, I am confident are very different, because what you get here when compared to the previous generation is a boot that feels a lot more like a synthetic. This is a much stiffer boot. Now, it does soften up as you wear it. It actually softens up really nicely. However, there is definitely some creasing that you associate with a synthetic boot. So by using a more synthetic yarn, and also by using that Grip Control Pro element, which is slightly thicker, slightly more sticky, the whole boot feels that little bit more plasticky and that little bit less soft. It also means that the boot is significantly thinner than it was before, and that also means significantly less protection. But as I mentioned earlier, that also means that the boot gives you and offers you a much more raw, one-to-one barefoot sensation than you got from the previous generation. And if I'm being honest, personally, that is a trade-off that I am more than willing to make. The stiffness here goes away, and it isn't a huge deal breaker for me when you give me this kind of touch and feel on the ball, and also when you give me the added benefits of the fit of this boot. The fit and comfort here is absolutely fantastic in 90% of the boot, and we'll talk about that now. Let's start by talking about the good, because the good is very good, and it's the way that they've reshaped the last for this boot. Now, the previous boot had a little bit too much volume for me. I said it on multiple occasions, and in general was a boot that was slightly better suited to people who did have wider feet. I'm really sorry here, guys, but some of that benefit for wider footed players has gone. You could probably still wear it if you have a wide-ish foot, but if you're a very wide or very high volume foot player, this midfoot probably isn't going to do it for you. And the reason I say that is because when I have these on, this midfoot area feels painted on. This is one-to-one at its best. It absolutely wraps around your foot and it really adds that feeling of responsiveness and lockdown that I was mentioning earlier. I absolutely love the way that this boot fits through the midfoot, the way that this instep kind of arches round and wraps under my foot is absolutely fantastic. And just this whole narrower, lower volume silhouette is really, really good. As I say, I'm kind of sorry for the people, my friend Tim, who loved the original Ultra because of its slightly higher volume, its slightly wider fit, and the way that it did fit them. And it was fine for other people like myself. This is less so of my friend Jay dubbed the X19.1 the people's speed boot, and ever since, every time a new boot comes out, we're like, oh, is this the new people's speed boot? And the Ultra was kind of it for a little while. Not anymore. This definitely isn't a boot for everyone. Also in that midfoot area, you have this brand new central lacing setup with this knitted portion that runs through the middle to give you nice stretch so that you can get in the boot without overstretching, so that it remains really responsive. This just feels and looks premium, and I love that about this. Just the level. This looks like such a well put together football boot, and I really, really like that. But that's all the midfoot. What about the forefoot and the heel? Do we have any problems? Well, we'll start with the heel because yes and no. The heel is not particularly padded. It feels pretty decent and it gives reasonable amount of lockdown in the heel. It's good. It's not mind-blowingly good. It's not as good as the midfoot is. And to start with, I did have a tiny bit of heel slippage. Now, there is the solution that you wear grip socks with grips up the heel, and that absolutely solves the problem. But that doesn't excuse the boot from having a small amount of heel slippage. But I don't think that's a deal breaker, and I think that's definitely going to vary from person to person depending on your foot type. So not a deal breaker. The heel is good and I have no complaints, but it's not, oh my god, this is incredible, which is exactly how I feel about the midfoot. And then the toe box. The toe box for me is slightly too high and with slightly too much room. So they have slimmed down the silhouette of pretty much the entire boot, but I think you can see that there's kind of like a higher, more rounded front to the boot, and I'd just like to see that come down a little bit more, and the same across this area here. I just feel like there's a tiny bit too much room through the forefoot of the boot when you compare it to what you get from the rest of the boot. It's not enough to put me off the boot at all, but it's definitely something to be aware of. In terms of sizing, when talking about the length, true to size is pretty much the way to go. So I got the US 8 that I would normally buy in Puma boots here. However, I was tempted to go down half a size, and I may try it in a future colorway, and that's just because of that higher toe box. I think it leaves a little bit more room, so I reckon I could potentially go down half a size. If you want the tightest possible fit, it might be worth a gamble, but for most people, true to size is the way to go. And in terms of the width, if you have a wider forefoot, you should be fine. Through the midfoot, you're definitely looking at a narrower boot. This isn't mercurial narrow, but it is certainly a narrow football boot, and it's not one I recommend for people who have very wide feet, even though there's definitely a bit of width there. To touch on the comfort, I think this is a supremely comfortable football boot considering the materials that it's made out of, how thin it is and how light it is. You sacrifice comfort to get those things, and you don't really have to do that here. Like I say, the heel's the only area that took some getting used to, but the midfoot, the forefoot, even underfoot, I didn't really suffer from any stud pressure either. I think that this is a very comfortable speed boot and is probably, in comfort terms, the best of the big three. A raw, barefoot, aggressive, responsive, comfortable speed boot with a price tag lower than its competitors. Puma have done a phenomenal job here. I am very impressed with what they've put out, and I will definitely be using the Puma Ultra 1.3 a lot more. I kind of knew it from the moment I put them on, and my enjoyment from wearing these has grown and grown every time that I've slid them on my feet. If you do like the looks of the Puma Ultra 1.3, do let me know down in the comments. Of course, get subscribed to the channel. It helps us out a huge amount, as well as smashing that like button. And if you really want to be a Boot Wizard hero, then please head over to patreon.com/bootwizard, where you can check out how you can support us. You can also support us by buying your Ultras from our Boot Wizard authorized approved link down in the top pinned comment. But that's all from me here today. I hope you've enjoyed it. Have a good one, and we'll see you soon.